how connectivity is evolving to kind of meet those needs from both sides. So we've got a pretty diverse lineup here. So I'd like to start off by welcoming everyone onto the stage and handing you over to Lynn from Delta Partners, who will be your moderator for this session. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. Awesome. So thank you everyone for being here. And maybe before we get started, we'll do a quick round of introductions so that everyone's comfortable with who we are speaking to today. Maybe we will start with you, Kapil.
Hi, good morning everyone. Thanks for joining us for the panel discussion. I'm Kapil Chugh. I basically represent Adani Connects. I head the enterprise and government business for Adani Connects back in India. So Adani Connects is an organization which is building data center parks and also building the cloud infrastructure and the IT infrastructure in the country with a mission of building 1 gigawatt data center capacity in India. We are partnered with EdgeConneX to take our data centers globally. So this is what we are.
Hi everyone, Andreas here. I'm from iWonder. iWonder is call it Netflix for documentary films. So I represent the OTT side at this panel. Obviously connectivity is a key part to what we do and optimizing for what is in place already at the moment, but also obviously looking at what are the trends, what are the new things that are out there that could be of interest to content providers like ourselves. Funnily enough, I used to work at Delta Partners as well prior, and have been in TMT the last almost 20 years now. That's me.
Hi, I'm Ranjan. I'm a co-founder of Lightstorm and looked after primarily all the growth and the overall strategy for the company. And to give you a quick introduction about Lightstorm, Lightstorm is a young company originating out of India, but now spreading across Asia, focusing primarily on providing high-quality, resilient, low-latency connectivity across data centers and providing cloud-to-cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud connectivity solutions. That's at one level that we do, and at the other level, we are also opportunistically in certain markets provide more fiber-based services like fiber-to-home infrastructure for ISPs and telcos. That's what we do, and that's it. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vijay Kartigesu. I'm the CEO of Swamio Media. We provide a video gaming and esports platform solution for telecom operators to enable them to monetize the whole gaming value chain. And that's what we do.
Awesome. So let's get started. So just talking about why this topic is important, right? Obviously, in the last couple of years, we have really seen content as well as connectivity growing within the region. In terms of OTT, every year we're adding 20 million viewers. Today, the space is 200 million subscribers. They stream 9.7 billion hours. Talking a little bit about gaming as well, we have 1.3 million mobile gamers just within Asia. So of course, there is a large demand for connectivity in order to make these businesses get a very good customer experience for the end users, right? Given this large demand for content within the region, how important is it to have resilient connectivity for a content provider today? And how does that translate to what do you look for a connectivity provider? Maybe.
Yeah, so I'll go first.
Yeah.
So basically, when we talk about any of the OTT platform, correct, we all should understand that OTT has a great ecosystem, and it has actually changed our viewership looking forward. Earlier, we used to sit in a room, watch television on television, and the content which was getting broadcast through the TV satellites or the DTH. Now the world has totally changed, correct? We are always connected through our devices, which are compatible with the connectivity mode, and the platform which gives us so much of content, correct? So as mentioned by Lynn, so yes, very honestly, connectivity is by far most important for any of the OTT players to deliver the content. Because if I have best of the content, correct? If I have best of the streaming services, if I have best of the infrastructure from where I am running the content, but if my devices on which the content is getting delivered or from where I am streaming the services is not having that great connectivity or the bandwidth, I'll not be able to stream that in a particular fashion, which will give my customers the best of the experience. If it takes a hell lot of time, if there is a buffering, if there is a lag in the content which is getting delivered, nobody will be interested, correct? And the customers or the consumers will start making a notion in their mind that this platform is not great because of the connectivity experience. So I think, yes, by far, one of the most important feature for any of the content delivery providers is the connectivity. But at the same time, when you talk about connectivity, it's not only the end user connectivity, but also from the side which we are streaming, correct? So as I am from the data center industry, we understand the importance of giving the best of the infrastructure from the server level to the connectivity from where I'm streaming the services. So this is my opinion that yes, we really require a resilient connectivity, and that is where you have started seeing most of the OTT players have started either creating their own networks, correct? Or they have started investing on the networks, getting it leased from the different service providers.
I fully agree, even, I mean, coming from the content side, that connectivity is obviously critical. It's the minimum you need to deliver before everything else that you do, because if it's buffering, if the player doesn't open, if you have errors, it's the worst thing for customers, and customers are very sophisticated now. They're used to what a Netflix delivers, and unless you, even for us as a niche SVOD provider, since we focus on factual entertainment or documentaries only, we need to make sure that what we provide is on par with what a Netflix does, because otherwise customers will simply not put up with it. And so that means we are constantly tracking by country our buffering rates, our errors, our network performance, and we do see differences by country. So depending on what CDN you work with, it can really show, for instance, our current one in Indonesia performing worse than if we were to go with someone else. Do we make that switch or not? It's a very critical piece to everything. I can also share an example of when, in between Delta and I Wonder, I was at iFlix, the call it Netflix for Southeast Asia out of KL. And back then we were directly competing with Netflix, and we ran tests between the same piece of content that we had and that Netflix had, and compared the mobile performance and all the speeds and KPIs around it, and we saw that we performed better because iFlix was geared and optimized to emerging markets rather than a Netflix model that starts global and then perhaps regionalizes or localizes after. And a number of ways of how back at iFlix we did that, and we had local server boxes that we put into actually our telco partners in order to reduce latency and buffering, and a whole number of other optimizations to make sure that, again, the minimum basics were covered, and that is to provide a great customer experience that starts with connectivity.
Yeah, maybe I just want to add here, and I fully agree with my co-panelists here. But from the connectivity side, and because I come from the connectivity side, there are different dimensions of connectivity, right? So there is an aspect of latency. And there are segments in the market which value that heavily, right? For example, the gaming, where you, of course, need to have latency. You cannot have buffers and delays in response times. But then there are other aspects. For example, availability and flaps. So if network is, we run one of the largest payment company in India. It does 2 billion transactions a month. And if the network is not up for 15 minutes, it loses the whole month's profitability, whole months. So, for such a customer, availability is absolutely super critical, right? or talk of flaps, and we have BFSI customers and so on. So when you're doing a transaction, if there's a flap, the packets will fall and you will not be able to complete the transaction, and then it leads to the whole cycle of customer dissatisfaction and so on. So when you look at, therefore, connectivity and, generally speaking, loosely speaking, quality connectivity, there are different aspects of that, starting from availability to latency to, uptime quality and flaps and so on. So all of these are important in different degrees to different customers. And, and that's probably another thing, because it's not one size fit all.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I can just quickly add. I want to kind of probably set the baseline. What do we mean by content? I think that will help the discussion because I'm coming from the gaming industry. But I spent 20 years building and running networks. I'm talking to lots of telcos and providers. We are still using words like eyeballs, because content used to mean that you actually consume content. It's no longer like that, because these eyeballs are now creating content as well. So what's happening in the content world? So there's not only you're pushing content to people, people are creating content and sending it to you, especially with IoT and all the other things happening. The content is actually being created at the end users and pushed to you. And also now, usually when we mean content that it's saved in a file, like a static content, and people pull it and watch it. But when we talk about video gaming or metaverse or any online interactive things, it is no longer a content. It is actually connectivity requirement that actually requires no buffering, zero buffering. It has to be immediate and real time. So that is very important for our discussion. So yeah, well, I think we will continue to discuss further.
Thank you. So I think good segue into the next question, actually. So we are seeing a lot of trends in content. Some in the region includes the aggregation from telco and pay TV operators, the rise of addressable advertising connected TVs, migration of sports rights to streaming platforms, and other streaming use cases for 5G, including the likes of AR, VR. In Asia, a lot of consumers are also already attending gaming, socializing, attending concerts, purchasing items on the metaverse, right? This includes your typical Roblox, Decentraland, Asia's own very sandbox, and even Zepeto. So the metaverse is obviously changing up the way that content is being delivered and could expand access to digital content and digital infrastructure within the region. Even in India, right, we are seeing plans for a pilot launch of the digital rupee to facilitate metaverse transactions. So what are some trends, right, interesting to understand that you are seeing in your industry today? How would that change your requirements for connectivity?
Yeah, maybe I can kind of continue the discussion about this content, the change of definition of content too. One of the major issues I see that we need, as an industry, we need to fix, we are still talking about network as a separate piece when it comes to a compute process, right? They are no longer separate anymore. So there was a time, all the telcos, we talk about routing, let's route to the server properly and done with it. Not anymore, because if you are talking about content, if I'm popping up a game server, I'm not just popping up the game server in one data center. I can pop up anywhere my customers are on demand. So that the network need to be provisioned on demand as well. So this concept of connectivity is no longer just network-centric. It is network and also compute process. That marriage should happen. Still, it's very infancy stage. That's where I see the trend is going.
So just to add on Vijay's point, the very valid point, I guess Vijay has put it across. So now the trend has already been shifting, correct? So earlier, if you talk about any of the OTT players, they were trying to create everything on their own. But now they have started shifting their workloads to the cloud service providers, because the cloud service providers are actually giving them the complete ecosystem, where they don't have to worry about the scalability, where they don't have to worry about the network availability and the quality of network, correct? And where actually the OTT players are not even worried about the cost factor, because they know as soon as the user hits, they will be able to scale. As soon as there is no user base, they can shrink it back. So going forward, we are seeing the same kind of trend where not only the consumer, but the OTT platforms themselves have started understanding that creating everything on their own, correct, and treating it as a different pieces will always be a challenging job for them. So that is where they have started relying more on the cloud service providers. And we are also seeing that shift because of this kind of shift from the content providers or from the live streaming organizations. Since they are moving to the cloud service provider, the cloud service providers have started taking keen interest on getting their hands in the laying of undersea cables. Correct. We are now seeing the trends where you talk about all the three biggies, the Amazons or the Google or the Microsoft. Everyone is trying to lay their own cables in the consortium because they understand tomorrow when they talk about these kind of platforms running from their services or consuming their cloud services, they will for sure require these kind of capacities to cater to.
Happy to maybe jump in there from the OTT perspective, or at least from what we have seen. And I mean, I think AWS's phenomenal growth is testament to what they provide to their customers, and it's been the same for us. Even back in iFlix days, we worked with AWS and were beginning to be a key customer that the Amazon CTO, Werner Vogels, came to visit us, and we had lots of interactions on what we can do better and differently, particularly in emerging markets. But as I mentioned earlier, we also had some of our own network and boxes and servers in place, because the industry maybe 5 years ago was very different to what it is now. Because today, I can happily say we have everything in the cloud. We are completely serverless as an OTT service. And why? Because, as you mentioned, partners like AWS just really do provide an incredible value proposition for us, which means it can scale as we scale. They have a mindset of helping us understand where potential efficiencies can be found and where we can do things differently. And then they perhaps take a small hit on what we pay them at a unit level, but because units are going up, overall they benefit. And that's just a great partnership. We do get approached by a number of different cloud providers from time to time, and they ask, what would it take for you guys to kind of consider us? And actually, it's quite a simple answer from our end. Of course, it has to match what we already have, but it's an even more actually simple answer, and that is you need to convince my tech guys who are very happy with AWS to make the switch and change to another provider out there. But in conclusion, it's incredible what cloud computing has already built to support video streaming or OTT, and it's a great starting point on which to build on for all the other features and things that everyone is looking at.
Yeah, maybe just again to delve deeper into the connectivity side of the space. Obviously connectivity follows compute, right? So, and therefore to understand what is the emerging need for connectivity, you need to understand what is the emerging changes in the compute end, right? And as you look at, we kind of all, I think we generally agree, that the future is essentially, whichever way you look at compute, the future is essentially large data centers, hyperscaler data centers at one level, smaller edged data centers at another level, and a very high quality, resilient, low latency connectivity between the two, correct? Now, how do you provide that connectivity, and what needs to happen to be able to, so there comes the value of fiber, of course, because that becomes very critical. And again, we can get into a lot of depth on that because that's a chapter by itself. But stepping aside, I think the other important thing, what I think Vijay was also referring to, is making network simple, right? And networking simple. Which what does it mean? I mean, it means giving control to the end users. So having a basically a simple, scalable, and a resilient network which can be provisioned, automated provisioning by the end user, right? So you need a connectivity between point A and point B. You should be able to log into a portal, quickly get that. And you want to increase your connections, you have some, say, spurt of demand, you should be able to do that on the fly. You want to reduce because there is inefficient usage, you should be able to do that in the fly. So this network as a service is something which is critical, therefore. I mean, so therefore, at an underlying level, you need to have a very high quality, resilient underlying network. At an overlay level, you need to have this simplicity built in, which leaves the complexity out from the users, but leaves a very simple to use interface, which they can manage the network on their own.
Okay, so I think Kapil, earlier you touched on this just briefly, but it's about people, the OTT players, the content players that are investing alongside consortiums with the subsea cable operators. So we have seen a lot of that happening, especially within the region. You know, Facebook has invested into trans-Pacific cables. That's your Echo Bifrost. There's also Apricot coming up. There is obviously consortiums approach. They are building it themselves, but we are seeing OTT providers investing in such networks together with the large players, subsea cables, OTT providers elsewhere. So your YouTube, Netflix, Hulu, they are also investing in terrestrial backhaul network, right? And I think one of the pain points that we see, particularly in Asia, is the middle mile or even the last mile network. Question is given this trend, do you think that this will also be something that we'll start seeing within the region, Southeast Asia and South Asia? And if so, what would be the value add that you would expect from a connectivity player besides the cost of capital?
So, as I mentioned, so we have already started seeing this kind of trend, correct? Where the hyperscalers are creating a consortium with the telecom service provider, trying to create subsea cable capacities across the globe. So I can actually speak about our own organization. Since we understand the needs of the customer, so what we thought of that we should actually be able to deliver the complete ecosystem rather than giving them services in a bits and piecemeal basis. So what we are trying to do as an organization, so we are not solving only the data center and the IT infrastructure piece for the customers, but also what we are trying to do is we are trying to build our own terrestrial cable network within the country. So we are already present with close to around 2,000 odd kilometers in the country, which we are again now enhancing. We have already got our NLD ILD license, which will actually further enhance us to have our connectivity running within the country. And through our ILD licenses, we will be creating consortium and getting the undersea capacities, correct? Which will actually help us to enable all our customers to have a seamless connectivity, because it's the connectivity and the IT infrastructure which goes hand in hand to give you the best of the experience. So we have been building this kind of setup, and as Ranjan also mentioned, correct? So the second phase is basically taking these core data centers to the edge. So we are actually now floating to the edge, correct? So we are trying to take the content closer to the user group so that as soon as we have 5G and the other technologies getting rolled out, we should be able to deliver this content very close to the consumers, which will actually enhance. So see, the OTT or any kind of streaming platform, correct, will be gauged on the basis of consumer experience, correct? And that can only be enhanced as soon as we have the content sitting next to the consumer. So we have already started working on that. But at the same time, as you asked for, do we see the OTT players investing on the subsea cable capacities? I feel, as Andrew also mentioned, correct, till the time they are getting a platform which is delivering end-to-end, they might not be very much keen to invest again on creating something which is already there. But yes, the day the size become humongous, the day they understand that they can create their own ecosystem and can run exactly what they are getting it from AWS, Google, or Azures of the world, because these are the three kind of biggies who are actually governing the market leadership. So then only this time we will see where the OTT players, correct? When we talk about the OTTs, or likes of Netflix or Hotstar or anybody of their size will start investing on the subsea cables. Yes, as you mentioned about Metaverse, so they have multiple other businesses as well, because of which they are actually trying to lay their own undersea cable.
Maybe I can kind of add a quick comment on the investment of hyperscalers. Not just money. You can look at their balance sheet and say they can buy any cable you want, right? So that's where they are also investing, because network is no longer network engineer stuff. It has to be a software engineering. Right? So if you look at Google and Facebook, they're investing in technology innovation. Right? So if you think about, everybody talk about Kubernetes, right? Came from Google. And now if you look at what is Meta doing, getting into the metaverse, but that's controversial. But other than that, but if you look at the telecom infra project, and Open Compute project. Facebook actually invents 5G technologies and encourage open innovation in that. And they're open sourcing the whole 5G technology and putting lots of investment in technology innovation where telco should be doing it. Right? So we are this is a knowledge gap also they are creating. They are coming slowly into the telco world because they have the compute knowledge. Network knowledge they already have. They are the best software engineers, and they can automate things faster, where telcos and connectivity providers have to catch up to it. But still the telcos have the advantage of last mile connectivity because the hyperscalers, it's almost impossible for them to actually tap into the last mile. There's complexity. So there's last mile, so there's opportunity still there to do an end-to-end automation with them. But they're investing not just money, they're investing on technology innovation as well.
Yeah, but if your question was about whether we see content players investing in subsea and the terrestrial side, yeah. I think you look at the OTT space, and there are a lot of learnings from that. So, who have been the largest investors in the subsea? Not all the 4 OTTs equally, right? It has been primarily led by Meta and Google, swap fiber pairs among each other. And AWS and Microsoft lag far behind. And why so? The reason is how their compute environment is structured around the world, right? So AWS, Microsoft, these are region-based. They create regions, and there's a lot of capacity but required within the region, but relatively little capacity goes out, right? On the other hand, Meta is more like a CDN kind of a construct, right? So there's a lot of capacity. Backhaul needs fat pipes. So and Google is somewhere near the middle. So even if you see Google and Meta, they have kind of similar level of investments, but the level of utilization of that network of Meta is by far higher than the level of utilization of the same network by Google, right? And this is because how they are structured, where the data needs to flow, and how much of the data needs to flow. So therefore, to give a general answer about whether we see content players going forward investing in the subsea side is very difficult. It depends on the strategy, it depends on the compute architecture, and it depends on the traffic, of course. Today, none of them does. There's none, right? Going forward, whether some of these volumes will be large enough that the backhaul volume that will require subsea investment, time to see, and we will see what happens. On the terrestrial side, however, and unlike on the subsea side, very much it is regulated, right? So who can own fiber, who can light fiber up, depends on the regulations of individual countries. And there are ways around. There are managed optical fiber network where you kind of achieve fiber economics without actually owning the fiber. Or you can't own the fiber, but you have structures by which you can do. That is the trend. That is something, especially in the metro, in dense urban areas, that is the trend. OTTs are pressing the fiber providers, the connectivity providers to give dark fiber, right? The content players haven't yet reached up to the scale where the telcos, obviously from a telco's perspective, it's not that profitable, right? If you give dark fiber, a fiber can carry 15, 18 terabytes of traffic, and you gain nothing as the traffic grows from nothing to 18 terabytes. Your revenue is fixed. How does it work? That, of course, is not exactly the best game for an operator to play. And operators play that reluctantly because some of these other players are so sizable that you can't lose them either. Yeah. But for the other content players, Netflixes of the world, it is not yet that stage. So I think it's a complex, and it will depend on a whole host of factors, and we'll have to wait to see how it emerges.
Okay, so let's touch a little bit about 5G because it is an upcoming topic, right? So Netflix, we have seen them rolling out mobile-only plans. GSMA predicts that the number of 5G connections in APAC will grow to 400 million by 2025. That's about a 40% penetration rate. So given that content really does drive the connectivity plans being provided to the end users, how will the introduction of 5G actually transform your industry, and what would be some of the business opportunities that will be available for the telco providers?
Maybe I'll kind of start the discussion of 5G. It is very infancy state still. Even the standards are just being formed, but still, what the major thing 5G is going to transform the way that we do provisioning of doing thing end to end, because until now, telcos go and buy these big switches from big vendors, the big clients, and put it in the network, and there we go, right? So with 5G, everything changes, because other than the physical antenna, everything is software now. So as a telco, either you learn to become a cloud, how to operate a cloud, or just take your hands up and give it to Amazon and Google to do it, right? Because it is very complex. It's not just running one server. We are talking about multiple complex cloud automation that you need to run in order to run an end-to-end 5G. That's number one. So there's a huge knowledge gap. The telcos, it's a technology skill gap. Telcos need to kind of fill in from standard networking to operating 5G end-to-end. But the opportunity there with 5G, especially with 5G slicing, now we can actually control a quality of experience delivery end-to-end. And because slicing, we can actually automate the last mile. So until now, there's no real way to automate or scale up and scale down or actually change quality of services to the last mile. You can do it in a manual way, but not in an automated way. 5G and 5G slicing is going to introduce that to us, but it's a long way to go. It's an opportunity to do that, but if telcos don't fill that knowledge gap to become a cloud operator, the 5G is going to be run by hyperscalers. That's given. I think in North America we are seeing that they are moving into it, right? So with Microsoft buying FM networks and everything is happening, and Meta is heavily going into 5G. So it is an opportunity, and also it's a threat to the operators, because the core of the control is going to be with the hyperscalers. And that is the concern. But other than that, it's a huge opportunity for new applications like gaming, interactive metaverse, everything. 5G is going to enable that low latency interactiveness.
Yeah, and also, I mean, maybe from our end on the OTT content side, it could enable much more live experiences, could be 4K, 8K on the phone, and even, you know, things around VR in a probably much bigger way. There's always some talk in our content space in the documentary genre on imagine travel documentaries and a real VR experience of you going and walking around the center of Rome, let's say, or any other great city, and that enabled by obviously the vast speed improvements that 5G delivers, opens up, as you were mentioning, a whole bunch of new possibilities. And I guess it's still also from our end, we haven't fully figured out that entire landscape and what it means for us, but it's certainly something very interesting that we're looking into at the moment.
Yeah, one quick thing about, I just forgot to mention about the 5G. What you're going to see, at least my prediction is there's not going to be one 5G network. It's going to be multiple, because it's a software core. And if you look at governments now, like I think I'm seeing it in Malaysia, there's going to be one antenna network that you can put up any core and connect to the common antenna network. So you can now see private companies, even Google, come out and say, hey, it's my Google 5G network, and tap into the antenna network and done with it. So there's a high possibility that there will be multiple 5G networks, and there maybe is open up new 5G service providers to come up, and also you can create a 5G core based on applications as well, because since you can do an end-to-end quality of services, could be a 5G core for content providers, 5G core for gaming. You can do multiple different 5G. So you're going to see private 5G networks and multiple 5G cores coming up in the countries.
On a different note, on connectivity and implication of 5G on players like the business that we do, for example, I think it's tremendous, and the opportunity is huge. There was some such study recently, and in a metro area, the densification that is required the fiber densification that is required is 7 times compared to a similar 4G LTE network. And you need small cells, you need multiple flowers, and these are millimeter wave radios, so therefore, so many of them are required, and they need to be fiber connected because the throughput is very high. So the opportunity is huge, both from fiber, but also from small cells and such other neutral infrastructures, where whoever, and you talked about a neutral kind of a antenna network which can be used by anybody, but that requires an underlying neutral infrastructure as well. So I think from that perspective, it is a hugely an opportunity as it spreads out in market after market. We believe that the growth opportunity that it represents for a neutral infrastructure player is enormous.
Yeah. So just to add, speaking about specifics to India, correct? So India being one of the large countries, correct, in terms of the geography as well as in terms of the subscriber base. When we talk about 5G, actually what we see, the change or the paradigm shift, what India will see with the rollout of 5G is primarily because there are certain citizen services which are yet not been able to roll out and reach to the remotest of the part because of the issues of the connectivity. We were not able to take fiber connectivity to the remotest of the villages or to the remotest of the towns. But with the 5G rollout, we will actually be able to take a lot of services to the remotest part, correct? And this will actually enable services like healthcare, education, correct? And also the OTT and the streaming services, which will actually enable the literacy in the country, as well as it will actually reform or reshape the complete digital ecosystem of the country. So we are also party to it. We have taken our own 5G spectrum, which is a private network. So we will be actually connecting all the edge sites through 5G so that we always have a redundant network to connect and provide the resilient setup of connectivity for running the infrastructure piece.
Thank you. So we are 3 minutes to time. I just wanted to check with the audience whether there are any questions that you would like to add. Anyone? Okay. So I think we go to our last question, which is, if you had one wish to make something better, what would it be? Maybe let's start with you, Kapil.
So there are multiple wishes, correct? But since I'm representing Adani, correct? Adani as an organization has been by far the largest in terms of the countries. And we have a vision of building a nationwide network, building the nationwide infrastructure and data center parks. So our vision or the wish list or our priority is to provide a digital ecosystem for our country, and that can actually contribute to the global growth. So this is our wish list.
For us, let's say, to eliminate buffering and to make 5G successful.
No, the simple point is that we need to understand that the connectivity and the content players are on the same side of the table. So often that is kind of, one doesn't understand that, no one wins until everyone wins. That's very important.
I mean, my wish is we should stop talking about just connectivity. We should talk about end-to-end service abstracted from all these details. And it has to be compute process, network, last mile, everything at one button, right? And just simple APIs, we can provision everything. It's not there. It's probably long-term dream, but that's where we need to be. It's like what Amazon did it to the physical data center. You go there, click a button, you can get everything. You don't talk about VLANs anymore. You don't talk about firewalls, rules anymore. Everything is just one click of a button. But I think network is stuck in time. After the .com crash, there's nothing happened in network. Right? Still, we are using MPLS and BGP version 4 and IPv4. We are stuck in time. We need to actually move up and meet up with the compute processors where we are. And it has to be a simple, abstracted service.
Agree. I guess you are talking about we should only speak about the SLAs. We should not talk about what kind of SLA. We should talk about the in totality of the SLA, not the network or not the infrastructure.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for this exciting discussion and obviously looking forward to what you guys will do next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you for
everyone.
coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, please join me in thanking Lynn, Kapil, Andreas, Ranjan, and Vijay for having that conversation. I'd encourage anyone, if you have questions, to meet with them afterwards and carry on the conversation. But thanks once again for taking time out of your day, and thank you all for being here and continuing to be here. Straight away after this, in a couple of minutes, once we've set up, we have a fireside chat with Wilson Chung from Digital Bridge and Claude Ashkar, Actel Consulting. So please stick around. We'll be looking at the current environment for investment, how it's impacting pricing, investment across the digital infrastructure ecosystem. Thank you.